The shelter buzzed with noise, barking dogs, meowing kittens, echoing footsteps of volunteers, and the occasional creak of the metal gates as families wandered through, searching for the perfect pet. To most, the shelter was a place of second chances where puppies wiggled with excitement behind bars and kittens meowed their way into warm homes. But in the farthest corner of Kennel Row C, behind a rust-stained gate marked with a faded "Do Not Tap on Glass" sign, sat an old K9 German Shepherd named Max, silent, still, and invisible. Max didn't bark for attention like the younger dogs. He didn't rush to the front of the kennel when someone approached. He had learned that hope often came with disappointment. His back legs, stiff from years of service, didn't move like they used to. A streak of gray coated his muzzle, and his eyes held a story, one written in loss, loyalty, and something even deeper: abandonment. Before the shelter, Max had been a hero, a decorated K9 who had served alongside Officer Jim Reynolds for nearly a decade. Together, they had tracked missing children, disarmed dangerous situations, and chased down criminals. Jim used to say that Max wasn't just his partner, he was his brother. But life has a cruel way of folding. When Jim passed away unexpectedly from a heart attack 2 winters ago, no one in the department knew what to do with Max. He was too old to rejoin the force, and no one stepped forward to adopt a retired police dog. Eventually, he was transferred to a local shelter where he had spent the last 14 months, watching, waiting, fading. Each week, people would walk by his kennel. Some would glance at the information card. Max, German Shepherd, 11 years old, former K9. Then they'd move on. Too old, too tired, too serious looking, too broken. Max learned to curl up in the same corner of his kennel, resting, his chin on a worn blanket with the department logo still faintly visible in one corner. The blanket had been all he'd carried from that life, his only connection to a world where he once mattered. Rain tapped on the shelter windows that morning, slow and soft. The sky was gray and the world seemed like it was holding its breath. Max stirred at the sound of footsteps. He lifted his head just enough to look, expecting yet another passing glance, another child tugging their parent toward the fun puppies. But something was different this time. Small footsteps padded cautiously down the corridor, delicate and hesitant. A little girl, no more than 6, with strawberry blonde pigtails and a pink raincoat 2 sizes too big, walked slowly, holding tightly to the hand of a woman who seemed exhausted but kind. The child looked from kennel to kennel with wide, searching eyes. The puppies barked with excitement, jumping, tail wagging, pleading for love. But the girl didn't stop. She walked straight past them all until her eyes landed on Max. He didn't move, neither did she. Their eyes locked through the metal bars, his dark and tired, hers soft and curious. She tilted her head and knelt down slowly, her tiny fingers wrapping around the bars despite the faded warning sign. "Mama," she whispered without looking away. "This one's sad." Her mother hesitated. "Sweetheart, let's look at the other dogs. He's older." "But he's still waiting," the girl said. Max blinked. Something flickered in his chest, faint, almost forgotten. Recognition? No, it wasn't that. It was something rarer, a thread of attention that didn't feel like pity. She wasn't afraid of his scars, his size, or his silence. She was just there. The shelter director, a woman named Carla who had worked there for nearly 20 years, stepped into the corridor and noticed the girl crouched in front of Max's kennel. "His name's Max," she said gently. "He used to be a police dog." The girl turned. "What happened to him?" Carla sighed, her voice softening. "His partner passed away. Max was brought here after that. He's been with us a long time now." The girl stood up slowly and looked back at her mother. "Can I meet him?" The mother looked unsure. "He's a big dog, honey, and he's been through a lot." "I know," the girl said. "That's why I want to." Carla smiled faintly. "He's gentle. He doesn't approach strangers easily anymore, but if you give him time..." "I can wait," the girl said simply. Carla opened the gate slowly. Max didn't move. The girl stepped inside, taking small, quiet steps. She sat on the floor across from him, giving him space. And for the first time in months, Max lifted himself up. It was slow, deliberate. Every bone in his body creaked, but he stood, walked forward, and lay down beside the girl, close enough to feel her warmth but not quite touching. She didn't say anything. She didn't try to pet him. She just sat. And so did he. A few minutes passed. Then her small hand reached out, so slowly it was almost imperceptible, and gently touched the top of his head. Max closed his eyes. The moment was so quiet, Carla felt tears sting her eyes. "What's your name?" she asked the little girl. "Lena," the child replied. "His name's Max. My name's Lena." Her mother crouched beside her. "Honey, are you sure? He's not a puppy." "I don't need a puppy," Lena said. "He needs me." The silence that followed felt like the sky itself had paused to listen. And then Max leaned into her touch. That afternoon, Carla processed the paperwork with trembling hands. Max's adoption file had sat unopened for over a year. Now it was being signed by a woman who hadn't planned to adopt that day, led there by a little girl with more heart than most grown-ups. As they walked out of the shelter, Max at their side, Lena smiled up at her mom. "Can he sleep in my room?" Her mother nodded. "He can sleep wherever he wants." Max didn't look back. He didn't need to. Because for the first time in a long, long time, he wasn't forgotten anymore. He was chosen. Max had spent his first night at Lena's home curled up at the foot of her bed. The blanket from the shelter, the one with the faded police department insignia, lay carefully folded beside him. Lena had insisted it come along, as if she somehow knew that it carried more than warmth. It carried memories Max wasn't ready to let go of. The room smelled of soft lavender and childhood. Glow-in-the-dark stars dotted the ceiling, and a tiny nightlight in the shape of a moon cast a gentle, golden hue across the walls. Lena slept peacefully, her breathing light and steady, while Max remained half awake, ears twitching at every unfamiliar sound: the creak of the floorboards, the hum of the refrigerator, the distant hoot of an owl outside. Even though his new home was safe, Max couldn't unlearn the instinct to protect. When the first rays of dawn filtered through the curtains, Max was already sitting beside the bed, watching Lena sleep. Something had shifted inside him, something quiet and cautious. It wasn't love, not yet, but it was the beginning of something close. Lena stirred and blinked her sleepy eyes open. When she saw Max beside her, her whole face lit up. "Good morning, Max," she whispered, reaching out to stroke his fur. Her fingers moved gently, reverently, as if she were touching something sacred. Downstairs, the smell of toast and eggs floated through the air. Her mother, Emily, stood at the stove with a hesitant expression, unsure how to prepare breakfast for a dog who had likely lived on strict routines and commands. She placed a stainless steel bowl on the floor with a mix of soft chicken, rice, and a few kibbles. "Hope you like this, big guy," she muttered. Max padded into the kitchen, cautiously sniffing the bowl. He glanced up at her as if seeking permission. Old habits, discipline forged in years of service. He didn't touch the food until she gave a soft nod. Lena sat cross-legged beside him, eating her own breakfast from a pink plate with cartoon bunnies on it. "Can I give him treats later?" she asked. "We'll see. Let's let him settle in first." Max finished the food slowly, licking the bowl once before sitting down beside Lena like a silent guardian. Emily watched this quiet exchange from across the room, feeling something stir in her chest. A warmth, a worry, a hope. She hadn't expected any of this. Not the visit to the shelter, not the adoption, and certainly not the way her daughter had instantly connected with a dog most people overlooked. Later that afternoon, they took Max to the backyard. It was a modest space, fenced with cedar boards, a few scattered toys, and an old swing set that creaked in the wind. Max stepped out slowly, sniffing the grass, the wind, the air. He walked in slow, thoughtful circles, checking the perimeter. like he was still on patrol. "He's doing his rounds," Emily said quietly. Lena giggled. "He's protecting us." Emily crouched beside her daughter. "He's trying to figure out if he's really home." Lena nodded with all the seriousness of someone who understood more than her years should allow. "He is." Max paused by the swing set, nose lifted to the breeze, eyes scanning the trees like old habits still whispered to him. Then, for the first time in days, he sat down, not in that old curled-up pose of surrender, but upright, alert, present, over. The next few days, Max began to settle into his new routine. Every morning, he would follow Lena to the door as she left for school, tail low but gently wagging. And every afternoon, he would be sitting by the window when she came running down the driveway, her pink backpack bouncing with each step. "Max," she'd call out, and he'd perk up immediately, his ears twitching, eyes locked on hers as if counting every second apart. The bond between them grew without fanfare. There were no tricks, no commands, no forced affection, just quiet companionship. When Lena did her homework on the living room floor, Max would lay beside her. When she read her books aloud, he would rest his head on her lap. And at night, he always waited until she fell asleep before curling up by her bed, keeping watch over her dreams. But even as he learned to trust again, some moments still made him flinch. One evening, Emily accidentally dropped a metal mixing bowl in the kitchen. The loud clang echoed sharply, and Max immediately lowered his body to the floor, ears back, tail stiff, an automatic response born from years of being trained for danger. Lena, who was coloring at the table, dropped her crayon and knelt beside him without a word. She didn't touch him right away, she just sat there whispering softly, "It's okay. It's just a bowl. You're safe now." Max looked at her, his body still tense, but her voice wrapped around him like a balm. Slowly, his breathing calmed, his body relaxed. Emily watched them from the kitchen doorway, her heart aching. She realized Max wasn't just healing. He was teaching them something too, about patience, about scars, about how even the strongest need gentleness to survive. The first time Max wagged his tail without hesitation was when Lena brought him a new blanket. "It's not the same as your old one," she said, "but I made it just for you." She had spent the afternoon tying the edges of a fleece fabric together, threading in strands of yarn and drawing tiny paw prints on the corners with fabric markers. Max sniffed it, then gently nudged it with his nose before laying down on top of it, letting out a low, contented sigh. That night, when Emily tucked Lena into bed, she asked her daughter a question she'd been holding on to. "Why did you choose Max, sweetheart? Out of all the dogs?" Lena thought for a long moment. "Because he looked like me." Emily blinked. "What do you mean?" "He looked like he lost something, like he was waiting for someone who never came. But he still waited. He didn't give up." Emily swallowed hard, brushing a strand of hair from her daughter's face. "You're an old soul, you know that?" Lena smiled sleepily. "Max is too." Max rested on his new blanket, eyes half closed, ears twitching at the sound of Lena's soft breathing from across the room. And for the first time in what felt like a lifetime, he didn't dream of sirens or commands. He dreamed of stars on ceilings, soft blankets, and the quiet heartbeat of a little girl who saw him, not as broken, but as brave. The days that followed felt like a gentle rhythm, a kind of unspoken song that only Max and Lena understood. There was something about the way they moved together that spoke volumes. She didn't need him to be a puppy. She didn't expect him to chase balls or leap fences or perform tricks. Lena loved him quietly, in the way someone loves something ancient and brave. And Max in return followed her like a shadow made of loyalty and grace. But even as the warmth of home wrapped around him, Max carried his ghosts. It started one rainy afternoon. Thunder rolled low across the sky and the gray clouds hung heavy, like a memory too painful to lift. Lena had been playing in the living room, building a castle from couch cushions with Max lying nearby, half watching, half dozing. When the first crack of thunder shattered the air, Max bolted upright, his ears pinned back, his breathing changed. And then, It happened. He let out a low, sharp bark, a different kind than Lena had ever heard from him. Not playful, not even protective. It was warning. Panic. His body trembled, and before Emily or Lena could react, he had darted into the hallway and wedged himself under the bench near the front door, paws shaking, eyes wide and distant. Lena followed him, crouching. "Low, Max? It's okay," she whispered. "It's just thunder." But Max wasn't hearing her. He was somewhere else, somewhere from before. Maybe it was a memory of a mission gone wrong, a flash of gunfire, a storm that came with danger instead of rain. He wasn't hiding from the storm. He was reliving it. Emily stood behind her daughter, unsure what to do. But Lena didn't move. She just stayed with him, resting her small hand near his paw without forcing touch. She didn't pull him out. She didn't cry. She simply said, "You don't have to be brave anymore." Those words, whispered in that soft hallway, were the beginning of something deeper between them. Later that night, Lena asked her mother, "What do canine dogs do?" Emily looked up from her laptop, surprised. "Why do you ask?" "I think Max remembers something bad. Like thunder means something worse to him." So together, they sat on the couch, Lena's head on her mother's shoulder, watching videos about retired K9 units, how they were trained to protect, to detect bombs or drugs, to chase down criminals, and how, when their service ended, many were too traumatized or too old to find homes. "He's a hero," Lena whispered. "Yes," Emily said, "he is." And from that moment on, Lena treated Max not just like a friend, but like a retired soldier who deserved honor and peace. She made a medal from cardboard and string and carefully wrote on it in purple crayon, "For bravery beyond barks." She hung it near his food bowl, and every day she'd salute him before school. Max seemed to stand a little taller after that. Still, the nights were hardest. Sometimes Lena would wake to hear him pacing, back and forth, his nails clicking softly against the wooden floor. He'd sit by the window and stare into the dark, ears twitching as if he was waiting for a call that would never come. One night, Lena couldn't sleep. She tiptoed downstairs and found him there again, a silhouette in the moonlight, his body still but his eyes searching. "Come back upstairs, Max," she said gently. He looked at her, his eyes tired. "I'm here now," she whispered. "You don't have to guard me. You can sleep." Max slowly walked to her side, and together they climbed back to bed. From that night on, he no longer watched the door. He rested, truly rested. A few days later, something unexpected happened. Man showed up at the front door, tall with a kind but weathered face. He wore a navy jacket with a badge sewn into the fabric and held a folder in one hand. "Hi," he said. "I'm Officer Daniels. I used to be Max's handler." Emily's eyes widened and she called for Lena. When Max appeared at the top of the stairs, his body froze. The man's voice softened. "Hey, old buddy." Max took one slow step down, then another. His eyes never left the man's face. Daniels crouched low, arms open, but not wide enough to frighten him. Max paused at the bottom, sniffed his hand, then sat beside him, his head pressed gently into the man's chest. It was like something inside him had finally clicked. Daniels didn't cry, but his voice wavered. "He saved my life, you know. We were ambushed on a routine patrol. Max caught the scent first, gave me just enough time to react. He got a medal, but he also got injured. That's when he was retired." Lena stood nearby, quiet as always. "He's happy here," she said softly. "He gets scared sometimes, but I help him." Daniels nodded. "I can see that." They talked for a long time. Daniels gave Emily a folder with Max's service records and a photo of him in his working vest, standing proud beside the squad car, younger but already noble. He didn't want Max back. He just wanted to say goodbye and thank you. That night, Lena placed the photo beside Max's food bowl under the handmade medal. "This is your wall of honor," she told him. Max licked her hand, and for the first time, wagged his tail with no hesitation. Max's world had changed completely. No more kennels, no more cold concrete floors or sterile fluorescent lights. Instead, soft beds, sunlit windows, and a girl who talked to him like he was the most important soul in the universe. Lena had become his compass, and even though the world outside still spun with uncertainty within their little home, Max had found a new rhythm. A rhythm not of duty, but of love. Though his age was showing and his joints stiffened a little more each morning, Max found comfort in routine. He would follow Lena from room to room, sometimes lying just outside the door while she brushed her teeth or scribbled in her journal. His ears still perked up when the wind howled or a car backfired down the street, but Lena's voice could always reel him back. His favorite time of day was when Lena got home from school. Every day, like clockwork, he'd sit by the door 10 minutes before the bell rang. Not because he could read time, but because his heart told him she was near. And when she finally walked in, flinging her backpack down and burying her face in his fur, it was like the world reset. One evening, Lena came home unusually quiet. She had a crumpled flyer in her hand, her lips pressed together in deep thought. Emily noticed. "Everything okay, honey?" Lena nodded slowly. "There's a fundraiser, at school, for shelter animals." Max, sensing the heaviness in her tone, rested his head on her knee. "I want to raise money for other dogs like Max, the ones who don't get picked, the old ones, the ones who just sit and wait." Her voice broke slightly. "Like Max did." Emily knelt beside her. "That's a beautiful idea." The next few days, their house turned into a whirlwind of craft paper, markers, poster boards, and dog treats. Lena called her project Mission Max. Her plan was simple: set up a booth at the school fundraiser and tell Max's story. She even made a large cardboard cutout of Max's face and wrote in bright letters, "He was left behind, until love found him." Max, of course, supervised the whole operation from his usual corner, tail thumping gently whenever Lena gave him a proud look. On the day of the event, Lena was nervous. She wore a handmade t-shirt that said, "Adopt the heart behind the eyes," with a sketch of Max she had drawn herself. Emily loaded the car, and Max, now officially part of the team, sat in the back seat, his nose pressed to the glass as they pulled into the school parking lot. It was busy. Crowds of kids and parents, tables full of cupcakes and raffle tickets, loud music, barking from other dogs brought by rescue volunteers. Max froze for a moment, the noise stirring something unsettled in him. Lena noticed immediately. She knelt down and placed both hands on the sides of his face. "It's okay, Max, you're safe. We're here to help them now, you're not alone anymore." He blinked at her, then slowly let his tail wag again. They set up their booth with photos of Max, one from the shelter where he looked defeated and old, and another from home where he sat beside Lena, tongue out and eyes full of peace. They had treats, coloring books for kids, and a donation jar shaped like a paw print. But what stopped people wasn't the flyers or the crafts. It was Lena herself. Standing beside Max, she told his story over and over to anyone who would listen. "This is Max. He used to be a canine police dog. He saved people, but then he got hurt and old. At the shelter, nobody wanted him. They said he was too old, too broken, but I picked him because he was waiting. And I think he was waiting for me." Parents paused. Children stared with wide eyes. "He still gets scared sometimes," she continued, "but he's my hero. And I want other dogs like Max to find their person too." By the end of the day, the donation jar was nearly full. People had wiped their eyes, patted Max gently, and left inspired. One woman said, "Your daughter has a gift, Emily. She's not just raising money, she's changing hearts." Max didn't understand the words, but he understood the feeling. He leaned against Lena's leg, breathing deep and steady. That night, back at home, Lena counted the money with Emily. They had raised over $600 for the shelter. "We can help so many," Lena whispered, more to Max than to anyone else. She held his old scarred paw. "Because you helped me help them." But even with all the joy, Max was aging. Emily began to notice it more. The slower walks, the longer naps. He sometimes winced when getting up. There were days when he didn't want to climb the stairs. The vet said it was natural. He had lived a hard life before. Arthritis, weakness in the hips, no immediate concern, but the signs were there. Lena refused to let him feel forgotten again. She made ramps from cardboard, cushions for all his favorite spots, a soft blanket near every room. She even started reading to him at night, short stories or notes she wrote, just for him. She once read aloud, "You don't have to chase bad guys anymore. You already saved the world. Now it's our turn to save you." Max would lay beside her bed, eyes closed, breathing slow, as if the words soaked into his very bones. Emily often watched from the doorway, tears stinging the back of her eyes. It was more than a bond. It was healing, for both of them. One day, a letter came in the mail. It was from the shelter where they had adopted Max. They had heard about Lena's fundraiser. The director wrote, "Thanks to you, several senior dogs have found homes. People often pass by the old ones, but your daughter reminded them what they're worth." Lena read the letter to Max that night, her eyes shining. "You did it," she whispered. "You helped them too." Max nudged her hand with his nose and gave a small, happy sigh. It was in that moment that Lena knew. Max hadn't just found a home. He had found a new mission, not to chase criminals or detect danger, but to teach love, to remind the world that every soul matters no matter how old or scarred, and he had done it with dignity, with grace, and with her. The seasons began to shift. Leaves turned amber, then brittle and brown. Max's fur, once thick with the strength of his working days, grew grayer, thinner. He walked slower, slept longer. But even as age carved deeper into his frame, the fire in his eyes remained, a soft, smoldering ember of loyalty and love, always ignited when Lena was near. For her part, Lena never once treated him like he was fading. Every day still began with the words, "Good morning, Max," whispered with the same joy as the very first time she saw him behind that cold shelter gate. And every night ended with her fingers running gently through the fur behind his ears, reading stories or simply lying beside him, telling him about her day. But one morning Max didn't get up. He was lying in his bed by the window, the one where the morning sun spilled in and warmed the floor. His chest rose slowly. His breathing was shallow. When Emily knelt beside him, he blinked, soft, heavy, but didn't move. "Mom?" Lena's voice broke as she entered the room, still clutching her school bag. She dropped it with a thud and knelt beside him. "Max?" Max tried to lift his head, but it wobbled and fell back to the blanket. His tail gave the tiniest thump. Lena's lip trembled. "No, Max, not today. Please." Emily placed a hand on her shoulder. "Sweetheart, I think it's time." The vet arrived an hour later. Lena had refused to let Max go to a sterile office. She wanted him to be at home, surrounded by everything he loved. The vet, a kind woman with tears already in her eyes, nodded solemnly. "He knows," she said softly, "and he's at peace. He's just waiting for your goodbye." Lena lay beside him, her small frame curled against his. She pressed her forehead to his and whispered through the tears, "Remember when no one saw you? When you were just the old dog in the corner?" Her voice cracked. "I saw you, Max, and you saw me, and we saved each other." Max's breathing slowed. His eyes never left hers. "I love you," she said, "forever. And I'll keep helping others. I promise. I'll keep telling your story. You didn't just help me. You helped so many." And with a final soft breath, Max was gone. The room fell silent. No sirens, no barking, no commands. Just the quiet end of a warrior's life, wrapped in love. For days, the house felt hollow. Lena still set his bowl out, still paused before opening the front door, expecting him to be waiting. Emily gave her space but stayed close enough to catch her when the tears came like tidal waves. Then one afternoon, Lena asked if they could go to the shelter. Emily hesitated. "Are you sure?" Lena nodded. "I don't want another dog. Not yet. I want to visit. Maybe help. Like before." They drove in silence. When they walked in, the familiar smell of disinfectant and anxious barking filled the air, but it didn't feel the same. This time, Lena wasn't a girl looking for a dog. She was a girl who had loved one with her whole heart. She greeted the staff, many of whom still remembered Max and the fundraiser. They hugged her, offered soft words, and thanked her again for her kindness. Then Lena asked if she could sit with the older dogs. She walked past the cages slowly, paused in front of one, a tired-looking beagle with cloudy eyes, and just sat down on the floor. She didn't reach out, didn't speak. She just sat, letting the dog feel her presence, just like she once did for Max. And slowly, the beagle crept forward, resting its head against the bars. Something shifted in the room, a calm, a connection. Emily watched from the hallway, her heart breaking and mending all at once. That became their new tradition. Once a week, Lena would visit the shelter. She didn't push dogs to play or cuddle. She just sat, listened, waited. And somehow, every time one of them would inch closer. Sometimes she'd tell them about Max. Sometimes she'd whisper stories of sunshine, soft blankets, and the way love could heal the deepest scars. Over time, the staff began calling it Max's Corner, a quiet spot where frightened, forgotten dogs learned that someone still saw them. One day, months later, Lena brought a journal to the shelter. Inside were pages and pages, each one dedicated to Max. His photo was on the first page. Beneath it, her handwriting read, "You were never just a dog. You were my heart, and now your heart helps heal others." She left the journal on the shelf near Max's corner. The shelter staff placed a small plaque on the wall beside it. "In loving memory of Max, former K9, forever hero, adopted by love, remembered by all." Years passed, but the story of Max lived on. Lena grew older, taller, her voice more steady, but always soft when speaking of him. She started a blog called The Dog in the Corner, where she shared stories of senior dogs finding homes, people who gave forgotten pets a second chance, and memories of her time with Max. She spoke at schools, helped organize local adoption drives. Every time someone hesitated to adopt an older dog, she showed them Max's photo. "This was my best friend," she'd say. "He was slow, he had scars, but he had the biggest heart I've ever known." And more often than not, people listened, because love, real love, doesn't care about age or limps or cloudy eyes. It sees the soul, just like Lena saw Max. And long after he was gone, Max continued his mission. In every family who took a chance, in every child who found courage, in every dog who got to sleep on a warm bed instead of a cold floor. One life, one dog, and everything changed. If this story touched your heart, please like, comment, and share. Let's honor the love of every forgotten dog like Max. Tell us in the comments, would you give an old dog a second chance? Don't forget to subscribe for more heartwarming dog stories that will restore your faith in love and loyalty.